afternoon. Welcome to what I hope and know will be another wonderful Manitoba Women in Tech event. I am Kelly Fornell, the CEO of Tech Manitoba, and I will be your host for this afternoon's event. And before I kick off into getting started here, before Joanne joins me on the stage, I just want to see if I can get a thumbs up or a clap. Are you able to see me and hear me okay? Okay. Excellent. And if for whatever reason you're finding that you're having some difficulties, maybe you saw that for you when you were networking just earlier, some links on the side, one in particular talking about if you're having trouble with Remo, there's a link for troubleshooting. And then if you need to put something into the chat, we've got some folks on standby who might be able to assist you quite quickly there. But as you're all able to hear me and see me, we can officially kick it off here. I respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting virtually, but working probably out of offices all across the province that are on the ancestral lands on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional gathering place of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene, and on the traditional homeland of the Red River Métis people. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities, organizations, and people in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. The Manitoba Women in Tech Meetup series was created because of a shared vision and ongoing dedication from three groups in particular here in Manitoba. And those would be New Media Manitoba, Tech Manitoba, and the North Forge Technology Exchange. We believe that there is a vision for what can be for women in tech that is not yet achieved. So together with our allies, we're here to support and share experiences, applaud accomplishments, and promote tech activities in a safe, gender-inclusive, and judgment-free environment. On the right side of the screen, you'll see that there's a link to a code of conduct for all of our events. Those really can be summarized in terms of be respectful, be kind, and please support each other. And I think that that is a great mantra for life itself and not just for these events. If you're super keen and you want to review the code of conduct, again, it's on the right side of the screen, and we've got a link that will take you to that document. Community, as we know, is incredibly important. Not just for women, but to feel included, to feel seen, to contribute, to make an impact. Our meetup group is a community that gets together nearly every month, perhaps not over the summer months of July and August, and not during the month of December. However, if there's ever a compelling reason that you feel that we should host an event, perhaps a beach event or something like that over the summer, provide feedback to us on not just this event, but all our events, and include any ideas that you might have for future speakers, future topics, future locations even, because we want it to be an open dialogue with you in terms of your feedback and what you'd like to see the group evolve to going forward. In terms of allies, one of our most incredible allies has to be BDC, the Manitoba Women in Tech Meetup Series, powered by BDC Capital's Women in Technology and Thrive Venture Funds, is really a wonderful collaboration between organizations who support gender equality in tech and entrepreneurship. The fund aims to connect women in tech to advance gender equality and promote the advancement of women in technology and entrepreneurship. BDC is generously supporting this meetup group, making our virtual as well as the in-person events possible. So please, let's give a big thank you, a round of applause virtually to BDC. And if you would like to learn more, there are details that will be placed in the chat. And so now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to those who may not know her, but certainly will after this event, Joanne Zook. I'll give an introduction and then it'll be off to learning from Joanne, and I guarantee you that afterwards you will be inspired, you will be fired up, you will feel like you've tapped into your confidence and your courage on how you're going to approach your next negotiation, be it your professional or personal life. And it's evident by the number that we have in attendance for the event this afternoon that this topic is timely and it's relevant to many of us, and why wouldn't it be? So I'm very excited to introduce Joanne, who is a leadership and strategy expert with a reputation for changing and challenging cultures and growing leaders. She splits her time between corporate consulting and helping female entrepreneurs negotiate effectively in their businesses. Following a nearly 20-year career as a senior executive in the Manitoba Public Service, She developed a series of fearless negotiation programs, which seeks to fill the gap, and it's a big gap, for women-specific negotiation thinking around the world. You'll find her speaking at conferences like this, being interviewed on podcasts, guest coaching, wherever she goes, and sharing negotiation and strategy advice to business owners daily on her Instagram account, at joanne.zook. If you're looking for more details from Joanne, I highly recommend reading her blog posts found on her website. She holds 2 bachelor's degrees, a master's degree, and a number of certifications. She holds numerous voluntary roles that you can read about on her LinkedIn profile. She's married with 2 fearless daughters and loves to go on epic cycling adventures with her husband. We are very fortunate to have her with us today, and I now ask Joanne to please join me on the virtual stage. And you're here.
I'm already here. You can't
here.
get me. If we were on an actual stage, I would have run up, and you know that. Kelly and I have known each other for some time now. Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here, and so excited. Even in the precursor to the meeting, I had a couple of conversations at my table, and we have people here who aren't just from Manitoba. So I love that the word has gotten out, and that we are meeting with people from really from all over, which is amazing. So if you bear with me for a moment, I'm just going to have to not.
So maybe Joanne, will you pull up your presentation? I'll let the group know that on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a Q&A link. If you want to ask any questions at the end of Joanne's presentation, please go to that tab, type in your question. It can be anonymous or not anonymous. And then we have the function of being able to vote up the questions. And so depending upon how that voting goes, I'll ask Joanne those questions at the end of the event. So without further ado, I will hop off the stage and leave it to Joanne Zook, who's going to talk to us about fearless negotiation.
Wonderful. Okay. And the other thing I want to say is that there are those little reaction emojis and icons in the, I'm just going to hide that little thing. There's those little emojis in the corner, in the bottom right-hand corner. I'd love for you to give me an emoji if you have ever felt uncomfortable negotiating. I just want to test that this works. So click a wave or chat, or yeah, I'm starting to see thumbs up. And that's probably why you're here today. I'm really excited to be with you. Every time I get to sit down and talk with women, it just blows my mind how consistently our experiences are as we grow up and as we move through our careers. In particular, I really love this partnership between Tech Manitoba, North Forge, and New Media Manitoba. I've attended a few events and in person and online, and what you're doing to connect women across the tech sector is incredible. And I don't know if somebody is here from BDC, but without supporters like BDC, this kind of work just doesn't happen. So I'm grateful for being here. And as a woman who actually redesigned her website over the last couple of weeks and works, peripherally in tech, really I'm very appreciative of this community. I want to start with a story. A couple of years ago, I was teaching at the University of Winnipeg, and I got into a conversation with one of my students. Now, she was an experienced software designer. She might even be here today. She was an experienced software designer. She'd been headhunted from another company because, of course, her company wanted to improve its representation of women. When she was hired, there were lots of promises made about mentorship, career development, the opportunity to grow her skills and really become a force in the company and in the sector. But when we had this conversation, she was 2 years in and she wasn't seeing any of it. Instead, she found herself overwhelmed with work. What she said to me is, I keep delivering, I keep meeting my deadlines, and my boss keeps giving me more work. The reward for good work is good work. But the problem she was having is he never took anything off her plate. So all of the responsibilities that had begun when she was more junior in the organization carried through with her, and she was carrying enormous projects. So there was no time for anything. There was no time for mentorship to help her move up in the organization. Between the projects that she was taking on, which were way more than her male colleagues. Plus, and I know many of you, maybe you'll give me a thumbs up if this resonates with you, many of you probably have this where you're also asked to take on a bunch of extra responsibilities in the office if you work for someone else. Planning office events, circulating birthday cards. Can you pick up cake for somebody's birthday? All these little things that really don't add value to your promotability, but they improve the culture of the organization. So what she told me was that she felt burnt out, she felt unhappy, she didn't feel at all valued. Those are the repercussions of not negotiating. There are obviously serious systemic issues that prevent women from having equal footing in organizations in every single sector. Tech is not exempt, and there are horror stories that I've heard from certain organizations. But one thing that really stuck out for me as we had this conversation is not once did she push back and say, you know what, this is what I need to be successful. I need you to take away some of these things. So she didn't ask for an assistant or staff, more resources to work on her projects, longer deadlines, the ability to give away low value tasks or delegate those to someone else. She was so focused on earning her place in the organization that she didn't realize she was working twice as hard as her male counterparts for $18,000 less. So I know that she wasn't unique. And many of you probably have similar experiences. So if this resonates, if you felt some of this over your career, I'd love a thumbs up as I take a little sip of water here. Yeah, she's not unique. We are all in this together. It is hard for us as women and people who were raised with a high degree of empathy to ask for what we want and need. The system doesn't help. So I'm here today to talk to you not about all the negative stuff, but how you can start negotiating every day for what you deserve and what you desire out of your business, if you are a founder, if you own your own business, out of your career, if you work for someone else, and out of your life, because this skill goes everywhere. But the odds are definitely stacked against us as women. So I want to start with a really wide view. In 2022, women had a record-breaking year in business. For the first time ever, there were 13 of the global Fortune 500 companies were led by women. So Fortune 500 is the list of the 500 most profitable businesses in the world. So in 2022, 13 were led by women. So that means that 95% of them are led by men. That's a lot of companies we have to take over, ladies. And you might be thinking, whatever, Joanne, you said it was a great year. We're moving up. We must be seeing progress. But that number was only up by 2 CEOs in the past year. At the rate of growth that we've seen over the past 30 years at the head of companies, and if we're moving toward this pace where women will reach parity and at the CEO level, we want to look back during the time when women were at parity in post-secondary. And so for about the past 30 years, women have been well represented in post-secondary education programs, and even now in many programs are overrepresented in those programs. So it's a good sample size. But if we base it on what's happened in the last 30 years, it's going to take more than 200 years before half of those CEOs are women. And so again, you might be thinking, I don't care. I don't plan on being a Fortune 500 CEO. Get on with the negotiation stuff, Joanne. I agree, but representation at the top tells us a lot about what's happening across the entire ecosystem, and it tells us what's happening in the middle. So I want to take a look from the bottom up. Right now, in North America, in their first entry-level jobs in your sector, in the tech sector, women are offered 2.5% less than men in the tech sector. Okay. Again, 2.5% doesn't sound like a big deal if we do the math. If it's $100,000 wage, that's $2,500. Cool. It's not a ton of money, although it would help with those student loans, but it's just the starting point. So women are offered $2,500 less on a $100,000 wage. Men are offered more, but they also negotiate on top of that. And so, unfortunately, women don't. What we know about women is that 60% of women never negotiate for their salaries. And if you're in your career and you think back over the course of your career, if you've been in it for a while, think about how many missed opportunities there might have been throughout your career. If you're a founder, I don't want to leave you out either. Let's talk about you. A recent North American study found that on average, female entrepreneurs earn $68,000 less than male entrepreneurs that are in similar businesses every single year. So think about that. It's $68,000 this year. It's another $68,000 gap next year. And every year that accumulates and that grows. So again, a big reason for this is female entrepreneurs, we know, are much more risk averse and slow to grow than male counterparts. We see it in the data consistently. Only 20% of women ever make the first big leap in entrepreneurship across all sectors, and that's hiring their first employee. But, it doesn't really matter whether you come from working for someone else or you work for yourself. The same challenges hold true. And that is, unless you start negotiating right now, you are going to leave about $1.3 million on the table throughout your working life. So I don't know about you, but I would have no problem spending that 1.3 million probably on really great things that would benefit my community and do good in the world. There's obviously a lot of reasons for this. Systems, institutions were built by men, for men. But the reason I'm here today is that one of the big challenges that holds us back is actually a lack of confidence in negotiation. It's a skill gap. I said more than 60% of women will never negotiate for themselves. Now, give me a wave or a thumbs up if you care for someone else, if you have children or you have parents that you advocate for. We often think about, I can negotiate on behalf of my parents. I can negotiate on behalf of my kids. When I talk about negotiation, I'm talking about not your mama bear instincts. You're going to go after, if your parents have been wronged or you need to negotiate what seniors residence they're going to move into, I am confident you're going to be able to bring out the mama bear and do an excellent job. It's when you need to stand up for yourself. It's when you need to ask for what you need. And more importantly, what you want. So the first problem that we encounter as women is we don't often recognize opportunities for negotiation. We just take on everything and we don't even think about negotiating them away. So let's talk about where negotiation can happen. And when I talk about negotiation, let's define it. It is a process where two people come from different positions, but they have a goal of working together in a mutually beneficial way. So it's not aggressive, it's not high stakes. If you're getting hired into a job, that's a place your boss wants to hire you. You want to work for that organization. If you're partnering with another organization, you want to work together. These are opportunities for collaboration, and we have those opportunities every single day. So if you own your own business, you'll negotiate with clients, you'll negotiate with suppliers, staff, partners, affiliates, people that you work with. At work, if you work for someone else, obviously when you come into the role, you're going to negotiate your salary and your benefits. But as long as you're in the role, you can negotiate for projects and resources and what you need to be successful. Get rid of the birthday cake responsibilities. If you have chosen or family responsibilities and relationships, there are a lot of opportunities that you have to negotiate in your life at home. Scheduling, roles, commitments, time. We just came through a very busy, hectic holiday season. This was the first kind of mostly pandemic-free holiday we've had in a few years, and I expect that many of you spent a lot of that time really stressed out because you were the central nervous system coordinating the entire holiday experience for your family. I know I was, that is always a source of stress for me, but that's an opportunity to negotiate. Another place you can negotiate, of course, is your community. I sit on some boards and I volunteer, but if you're not negotiating for the roles that you're taking on and the support you're providing, you're probably doing a lot of work that's not a lot of add value that you can provide, but work that anybody could do. So there's lots of opportunities to negotiate. Why aren't we negotiating is the big question. Well, the big problem is most people, most women, don't ever learn to negotiate. It is exclusively a topic taught in business school. And so only those who are privileged enough to be in those classrooms ever learn the secrets. The rest of us kind of muddle through. We look to role models, we look to examples, we Google. Really, we do our best, but our best is poorly informed. We know that men and women approach situations like negotiation differently, and what I've discovered is we have different blind spots. But we know a lot more about how men negotiate and their experiences with negotiation than we do about women and to us LGBTQIA plus folks, people of color, people with disabilities, people who have grown up with a strong sense of empathy. And the reason, of course, is because most of what we know about negotiation comes out of Harvard School of Negotiation. So it's part of the Harvard School of Business. Women have only been going there since 1963. And of course, even then, it was primarily white, cis, able-bodied, and very, very privileged women who were able to attend until very recently. So last year, I conducted a review of 400 teaching materials that Harvard University provides to instructors at other universities and colleges. And more than 90% of them were targeted toward the blind spots that men struggle with the most. So women, non-binary folks, people of color, people with disabilities, we have basically been ignored in the research. And so that, on the positive side, that means that there is a lot to learn. The one thing we do know for sure is that kids who are raised as girls or with high expectations of empathy, for us, our discomfort with negotiation starts really, really early. It's shaped by the age of 9. At the age of 5, there's like absolutely no difference between how children who are raised as girls and those raised as boys, how they negotiate. They're equally audacious in their requests. I was hanging out with my 4-year-old nephew yesterday, and he asked if we could go to Disney World this weekend. No question. And little girls and little boys ask for whatever they want. But between the ages of 5 and 9, kids start going to school and they're conditioned and socialized. And by the age of 9, girls negotiate for less than boys. They negotiate for less than boys, and they ask for even less. They have lower expectations when they negotiate with a male counterpart. So think about how this relates in your life. You're already walking in with a predisposition to any negotiation, asking for less than a male counterpart. If the person across the table is male, you have a predisposition to ask for even less. Okay, this is shaped early in our. It's a huge impact on our careers, our businesses, our lives. We get overwhelmed. I don't know if anyone else has had the midlife crisis in their 40s, but you want to walk away from it all at some point. For the past 10 years, I've been coaching women through negotiation, both salary and business negotiation. And during that time, it's been interesting because the same 5 things come up over and over and over again. So what I'm going to do next is show you, I'll show you how to prepare for an effective negotiation. But before I do that, I really want to talk about these 5 blind spots. These are the blind spots that are going to sabotage you and really prevent you from getting what you deserve and desire at work, in your business, and in your life. So one of the most common things is gratitude. I hear this like, I feel guilty asking for more because I'm so grateful to get the client or the contract or the job offer, or my boss is trusting me to do this project. I feel so grateful. That's gratitude. It's not a bad thing. It comes from being socialized as a child to appreciate every little thing that you've been given, reinforced by current culture. I have a gratitude practice. I'm not saying a gratitude practice is a bad thing. It's excellent for mental health. It helps you to shift your mood, especially helpful during challenging times. But in negotiation, gratitude serves as a blind spot. So here's what happens. You avoid negotiating. You avoid initiating a negotiation and just accept it. Accept whatever they offer. Maybe you received a job offer recently and you just said yes. I can't tell you how many women have said yes without even thinking when I've offered them jobs because they're so grateful to get the offer. And often it's because you don't know, you're not happy where you are. You want to move on. You want to be valued and validated, and that gratitude takes over. It can also take over in a negotiation. So let's say you are negotiating, you might get easily overwhelmed with gratitude if the other person agrees to some of your terms. If you ask for, let's say, flexibility so that you don't have to be in the office every single day, and they say, yeah, that's no problem. You might be like, oh, okay, that's fine. I don't need to ask for more. Often women will not take full advantage of the opportunity of negotiation and lay everything out on their table because they're so grateful. The next one I see is humility. And I hear this as, I want to prove myself before I negotiate it. So the woman that I was talking about at the very beginning of this session really struggled with humility. She wanted to prove that she was great. She wanted somebody to tap her on the shoulder and say, you're ready. So if you want them to notice you, you shouldn't have to say why you're great. People should just see it, and you just need to work harder and then they'll see it. If that's your mindset, you may be struggling with humility. Again, this comes from childhood, and it's particularly insidious for girls. So girls are not allowed to brag or be arrogant, right? As teenage girls, we hold each other to this standard. If you've been in conversations, whether now or as teenage girls, where you're like, I don't know who she thinks she is. Why does she think she's so great? We are not allowed socially to talk with confidence about the work that we do. It is forbidden in our cultural circles. As adults, though, we internalize this in the workplace. And I mean, I'm not saying go out there and be arrogant, but in a negotiation, this blind spot can cost you thousands and thousands of dollars. As adults, we expect people to notice our great work, and then we internalize it when they don't. We feel badly about ourselves and subsequently do more work. We make up for this conversation about our worth that we're not even having. So it can really be a strong deterrent, preventing you from entering the negotiation, limiting you from defending why you would need the things or deserve the things that you're asking for. It's a very, very powerful motivator and sabotage. The third one that I've discovered is generosity. This is really common among entrepreneurs, service-based entrepreneurs, particularly who work through relationships. So you might hear, or I hear often, I want to ensure I provide excellent value. I want to be generous. I want my clients to feel like they have gotten a great deal with me, that I'm a good deal. And I have to ask you, do you want to be great or do you want to be a great deal? And that's it's a philosophical question, but there are very different business models that go with each of those, right? So this is called generosity. It's another blind spot. And again, it comes from those socialized expectations we learn when we are young to never take more than the absolute minimum. Don't be greedy. Don't be selfish, right? As an adult in the workplace, it really does manifest as an internalized compulsion to be often more generous than the other person. So if you like to over deliver and undercharge, yeah, this is you. If you throw in extras, if you assume they can't pay, so maybe you're applying for a job at a small startup, and instead of asking for what you're worth, you ask for 20 or 30,000 less because you make assumptions about what they can afford instead of standing in your value. So undercutting yourself is a sign of generosity being one of your blind spots. The fourth one, which many of us can identify, is people pleasing. Ultimately, this is rooted in a fear of being disliked. It's an adaptive behavior. As children, of course, we are socialized to worry about everybody else before ourselves. Serve others first, think about ourselves second, third, fourth. And then, of course, as we get older, as we become parents, as we have to take care of our parents, we find ourselves second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, sometimes on that list. In the workplace, you might find yourself accommodating like every request, even though you don't want to. So if you're an entrepreneur, saying yes to that last minute meeting, I had to fight that one today. If you work for someone else, taking on an extra project without saying, no, something has to give. I can't do all of these things and do them well. So again, those things that are low value should be the first to go, but we feel so reluctant because people pleasing is, again, something that's been so deeply conditioned in many of us. And then the last one is faith. And this is a sneaky one. When you assume, and we often do this, we assume that the other person's a good person, the company is reputable, they will offer you a fair deal. That blind spot is faith. So we are socialized as kids to believe that people are good. We don't want to walk around believing people are insidious or bad or they're malicious. We are told good things come to those who wait. And believing in others, giving them the benefit of the doubt is a positive attribute. Absolutely. Except in negotiation, faith really blindsides us from looking at those offers with a critical eye, right? It minimizes our critique, and it limits our willingness to ask hard questions and challenge some of the terms in a negotiation agreement. But once an agreement's signed, what we also see with faith is that it inhibits our tendencies to go back and hold the other person accountable for what they agreed to. So for that woman who I talked about at the beginning of class of the session, she had something in her agreement that spoke to specific leadership talent development, but she was uncomfortable asking for the thing that was already in writing. That's faith. That's that expectation that somebody will come through for you, and you shouldn't bother them. You shouldn't have to poke them. People are good, and they'll get to you in time. So those are the 5 blind spots. I'd love to see an emoji here if any of these are ones that you struggle with on the regular, while I take a sip of water because it's very dry in my basement today. Okay, so a couple of important points about blind spots. Number 1, in different circumstances and with different people, different blind spots will come up. So some people will trigger gratitude. If somebody is giving you a terrific opportunity at one time in your life, you may always carry gratitude toward that person, even though you don't use it, even though gratitude may not be a blind spot for you every single time you negotiate. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, to get through these blind spots, to manage them, you need to start seeing them. So you need to start paying attention to them in your life and going, oh, hey, I got to catch myself, right? That's really the first step in not letting them sabotage you. Then once you've started to identify them and manage them and determine how you want to behave instead of the behaviors that are aligned to those blind spots, that's when you can start to really manage them in the context of negotiation. So I teach something, Kelly talked about it at the beginning, called fearless negotiation. It's the approach that I use to teach the process of negotiation to women. So everything I do is based on this model. And the way I like to think about it is that people who embody fearless negotiation are informed, capable, and comfortable in their power. So to be fearless, you really need knowledge first, knowledge about the process and the systems of negotiation, because it's always going to happen in the same way. You need confidence. You need to build confidence in your value and also in your presence, in being able to stay dignified throughout that difficult negotiation conversation. And finally, you need strategies that actually work for you, for women. And that's because when you have knowledge and you have strategy, then you're informed about how to move forward, how to proceed. When you have knowledge and confidence, then you're capable. You're capable of taking up space, controlling the pace and the tone of the negotiation. And when you have confidence and strategy, then you're powerful. You're a powerful force in really building the right kind of relationship that you need to build the deal that's mutually beneficial. So when you're all of those things, that's when you can walk into a negotiation and feel fearless. So how do you become fearless? Well, it's 9 steps. So 3 related to each of those pillars. We'll start with knowledge. So knowledge is really about being prepared for the process of negotiation, okay? And when we talk about the steps, it's review the risks, predict their priorities, define your desires. So when we talk about risks, what I mean is looking at the whole situation through an objective lens. Is the negotiation really going to be this catastrophic event that is high stakes, or you might lose everything? Or is it really a collaborative type of negotiation where you can work together to come out with a deal that benefits you both, where you both feel valued, right? So we need to look at it objectively, consider what if it goes wrong? What are the implications to you, to them, to the relationship? If you're doing this well, you're going to walk in with a strong understanding and prediction of how it's going to go, a sense of where you can push, where you need to be cautious. But most women do tend to overestimate the risks. The first mistake we make is assuming the worst. We catastrophize negotiation, and then we approach it far too cautiously as we proceed. Next, we need to predict what their priorities are. And there's an important note here. It's not all about the money. People are willing to pay for what they need when they need it in the right form. If you've ever forgotten to buy a birthday cake for your kid, or one of those things where at the last minute it doesn't matter what it's going to cost because you need it, that's a great example. It's not always about the money. And depending on who you're negotiating with, they might care more about your ability to deliver, your ability to deliver on time or start on time, bring the right team to play, a level of quality. They may not really care about the price within a range. But the thing about human psychology is that we tend to walk into negotiations thinking that the person across the table wants the opposite thing that we do. And if we want more money, well, they want to pay us less. And so what we do is tend to focus our effort and our anxiety in areas that often don't even matter to them. And we create the conversation in a space, in a very isolated space, rather than bringing in many different opportunities to negotiate. So this step is really about identifying what you think they're going to care about. Money might be one of them, but what else might they care about? That's key information that you'll use during the negotiation to really understand and justify the requests that you're making of them. The next step is to define what you want, define your desires, not what you need, but what you want. So this is about going beyond the minimum level of what you absolutely need out of the deal. And that's because when you define not just what you need, but what you love out of the negotiation, then you walk in with a different perspective. You walk in with a sense of what the ideal situation might be. What's the ideal outcome that you're driving toward? If you start with that, you have the ability to negotiate down. But if you start with where you need to be, you never get to negotiate up from there. So if you're doing this well, you walk in and you know all the things that you'd love. You talk about monetary, non-monetary items, and you start by painting that picture and moving from there and restricting and tightening from there. Next, we move into confidence. And again, 3 steps: blind spots, seeing your blind spots, supercharging your strengths, and managing your mindset. So seeing your blind spots, as we talked about, I'm not going to go in depth here, but this is really about spending some time in understanding where they're coming from, predicting them, and seeing them as they creep into into those conversations. For women, blind spots are the deep-seated, long-held fears that keep you small in the negotiation. But when you know that they're going to show up, it's kind of like having cheat notes for a test. They're still going to be there. They're still going to affect you. They're still going to pop up. But when you know they're coming, you have the ability to manage your mindset and work around them. The next step here is really focusing on your strengths. And for women, these are empathy and core values. So when you're using your empathy, you are able to help the other person feel seen, feel validated. And that helps them feel eager to work with you, whether it's in an employment relationship, whether it's a partnership relationship, it doesn't matter. When you feel seen and validated, you want to build your relationship with that other person. But there's a caveat here. Empathy can be an Achilles heel. You need to set boundaries around your empathy, or you risk being taken advantage of. The other piece for women that's really strong and is something that we often carry without even realizing it is very strong core values. And when you're grounded in your core values, in those values that really drive you, the things that you would use to describe yourself and your whole orientation toward life, you're actually able to tap into your inner knowing, your intuition, if you will, when those opportunities and when different benefits are presented to you in a negotiation. You're able to listen to what's your body saying and how does that align to your core values to help you really link those two and explain what it is about that particular benefit that isn't appealing to you and why it's not a good fit, or why it is that you're really worried about flexibility and why that's important to you because you want to be able to have a more balanced life, or whatever that situation is. Understanding your core values allows you to speak with so much more conviction and deep internal self-understanding. And then we go on to mindset. So back to blind spots. This is really about beyond the blind spots, taking care of yourself. Negotiations can be stressful experiences. So we need to take care of our mind, our body, our spirit before, during, and after negotiation. What's your protocol? What's your playlist before you come in? Who are you going to call for the pep talk before you have that conversation? So when you're managing your mindset effectively for negotiations, and particularly for the tough ones, 'cause negotiation can happen every day, but it's the big ones that we want to make sure we're preparing for. You need to prepare. You need to plan for what's going to come up, and have a plan for how you're going to stay in the moment, especially when things maybe take a turn, right? How are you going to control your emotion, stay calm, listen to your core values, and take the time that you need. So if you're doing this well, you're really walking in, you're taking up a respectful amount of space, you're comfortable in your skin, you're confident, you're in a collaborative mood, and really not letting the pressure of the situation kind of affect your vibe. And then the last thing is strategy. Again, 3 steps. First, refine your range. And this is about knowing 2 levels for the most important benefits you're negotiating. I call them your dream level and your dignified level. So your dream level is what you would love to get. So if you think about salary, what is the level that would be amazing and still possible, but what would make you feel super valued? That's your dream level. Your dignified level is the minimum level you would need to still feel respected if you said yes to it. If you don't walk in knowing both in that negotiation, you're not going to get as much as you could possibly get. So if you're doing this well, you know what your range is for all of those priority benefits that you're worried about. And you obviously start with the higher level. You never want to start with the lower level. Then we move into delivery, and we need to practice. We don't negotiate every day. The words feel weird. You need to get comfortable using them. So using words that flow out of your mouth is always preferable to scripting something in awkward technical jargon language, right? So having a normal conversation will really help you to feel confident and effective in that negotiation. So eventually, negotiation can be something you can slide into any conversation. The words shouldn't feel awkward. They're part of how you talk. When it matters, you shouldn't stumble on the words or present kind of a bravado, right? Often we come in and we have this shield in front of us. What I find with women is we often walk into negotiations and act like a completely different person. So you might be a really confident and comfortable person normally, but in that negotiation, you take up very little space. You have a quiet voice, or maybe your voice goes up an octave, right? There are some cues that we can look to. The opposite may be true. You might become this really intimidating Donald Trump-like personality that's, we're going to make a deal and I'm not leaving here until I get what I want. Neither of those 2 things are great. What you want to do is really channel who you are. Remember who you are and bring that into your negotiation. That helps to focus on the relationship first. It helps to protect your reputation and really start building that relationship with the other person, right? And then finally, you're not just walking away and leaving it there. So finessing your follow-up, that's about getting the agreement in writing and ensuring that the details that matter to you are actually in there. And then eventually ensuring you get those things that you've agreed to. So, if it's not a formal negotiation, you might follow up with an email detailing what you understand to be the terms, asking for confirmation. If it's a formal negotiation, obviously you want to get a lawyer to draft a contract, or you're going to get an employment contract. But ultimately, being aware of what's in that, reading the fine print, and holding the other person accountable to what they've agreed to is critical. It's basically doing the things that a professional does, right? So there you go. That is your crash course in fearless negotiation, and in especially those blind spots that are often keeping you small. Just like any skill, it really does take practice, and the more you practice, the more powerful of a negotiator you become. And I don't mean, when I say powerful, arrogant or obnoxious. I mean aligned to your values, aware of your blind spots, and really comfortable in the power that you carry and the space you take up. when you build the skill, it really, you do start to see impacts quickly, right? You get rid of those projects you don't want to be doing. You start creating space to say yes to things that you do want to be doing. So at the beginning of my talk, I told you that more than 60% of women will never negotiate for themselves. Maybe when I shared that stat, you were recognizing yourself in it a little bit. But so the truth really is negotiation is not something that you suck at genetically. It is 100% socialized. You can learn it, you can get better at it, and it will make a significant difference to the bottom line, to your bank account, to your freedom in life. So you have a choice to make. You get to decide which side of that statistic you want to be in. Are you going to be part of the 40% who never negotiate and leave 1.3 million on the table? Or are you going to start developing the skill? And you know what, like, let's take that 60% and make it 100% is really what I think that we need to do. But that choice is really up to you. So I've spent the last 30 minutes, I hope, demystifying a little bit of what the process is around negotiation, giving you some cheat notes the next time you find yourself in a negotiation. But this is it's really up to you. It's about practice. It's about practicing it in small ways. How are you going to do holidays differently next year? Negotiate that now. Get that in writing. Get that in an agreement with your family. Start to practice this approach at work, right? What are you going to start saying no to? What are you going to start seeking out somebody to delegate to so that you can create more opportunities to say yes to real opportunities to advance your career or expand and grow your business? How do you want to intentionally build your working relationship with, whether it's your boss or colleague or client or another person that you work with? How are you going to do that intentionally so that your work together is mutually beneficial? So they're not just taking advantage of your people-pleasing attributes. So start using these skills. I promise you that your confidence and your competence is going to continue to grow every single time you work on them. If you do need support with this, I'd love to help. I know that Shailene has been putting my website in the chat. You can visit my website. I have over 50 blogs about negotiation and specifically women's negotiation. And I do have a couple of digital courses that are available. If you use the code MBWITECH, you can get 20% off of those until January 22nd. I really believe in this work. It is something that expands our ability to generate income for ourselves and increase the economic opportunities for women, here. And as I was chatting with somebody before the session, increasing the opportunities for our daughters. I have a 19-year-old and 21-year-old daughter. And even though they've grown up with me and we've been talking about negotiation for their whole lives, they still struggle with it because they're so socialized to be grateful and people pleasers and humble and all of those things that we talked about. So we really do need to talk about this a lot. We need to share our successes. And if I can be of any assistance to you, I would love if you would reach out to me. So you can find contact information on my website. But thank you to Kelly and to all the organizers of this event. Shailene, I don't know if we have any questions, but maybe I'll stop sharing my screen.
Phenomenal, Joanne. Absolutely phenomenal. Like, I had to write down $1.3 million on the table, left on the table throughout your career. Like, that is a significant amount of money that a person could do tremendous things with. I think that's a pretty shocking number. And I just thought that was an excellent presentation and such good information. So thank you very, very much. We have a couple of stellar questions here that have had quite a lot of voting on it. So if we could just maybe go through those. The first one is, can you run us through an example of a conversation on how to ask for a raise?
So that's a longer process. Most salary negotiations, if you're being offered a job, those are going to be a one and done. Like, you're going to get a job offer and you might have a couple of conversations back and forth. It's not dissimilar with asking for a raise. But you do need to do some I would almost call it implicit change management work before you do that. Unless your company has like an annual review period where everybody is assessed for raises, it may come as a surprise to your boss when you walk in and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you about a raise," right? You don't want to ever take that person take them off guard. So things that I would recommend, first of all, would be starting to pepper in, maybe 2 or 3 weeks in advance of the conversation you want to have, peppering in reminders to your boss of all of the incredible things that you've done. Talking about, it's amazing. I've been here for a year, and in a year, like, I've led 18 projects, and I got this beautiful email from a client last week that we finished up with a year ago, and here's what they shared. Reminding your boss of your values and placing those as little, like little niggly ideas in their brain before you have that conversation can be really helpful to establish your value before you go into that conversation. It's the same 9 steps in terms of how you're going to approach the conversation, but with your boss, if you've been working for someone for a while, and maybe you found out that your colleague is making $18,000 more than you, and you want to approach that. It's all about them and what you deliver. And unfortunately, you have the most amount of leverage when you're applying for a new job and you're negotiating to move to a different company. That is 100% you're going to be able to negotiate for far more then. So you have to be a little bit craftier in doing it when you're in a role and you're just asking for a raise. Why should I give you more money to do the same thing you're already doing? So you do need to speak to your value, what you bring to the company, how much you've been able to accomplish. And this is not the time to be humble. This is the time to really lay out, what's the return on investment that they've gotten from you? How valuable have you been to this company? And so even in booking that conversation, don't be shy about it. Start peppering that into your regular conversations. Oh, I got this beautiful email, for a couple of weeks. And then when you do want to have that conversation, book a conversation that has the subject line compensation, right?
Yeah.
Don't hide it in and among other things. Don't make it number 7 on a list. I'd like to sit down with you for a half an hour. You don't need more than a half an hour to talk about my compensation. That's it. And then when you come in, you want to have been prepared. I did this several years ago. And so my daughters sat and watched me and gave me feedback over and over and over and over again as I prepared. It's more of a presentation in that case. You are coming out of the blue in how to prepare for that meeting. Also, don't expect an answer right away, right? So sometimes they need to go, okay, I need to go back and check a few things. We will often internalize, if we don't get a yes right away, we will internalize that as, from that humble blind spot again. If my boss doesn't say, yes, I'm going to give you a raise right now, you might think, oh, I guess I'm not worth it. When really they need to go and check the budget. They need to assess how much does your boss make, how much, like, what are the pieces of information they need before they can say yes. And very rarely, even in a new job salary negotiation, is the person you're talking to going to be able to say yes to every single thing in that one conversation. It will often be a couple of, sadly, awkward conversations, but knowing that up front and knowing that it's not failure if they say, I need to go and check on this. So yeah, I think those would be the key things I would pop up right away.
Fantastic. I would also add that I found for myself personally over the years, keeping track of things that were made possible or made better because of your involvement. Because oftentimes we go through a project or whatever it is and we forget, right? We forget. And then in those moments where we want to be able to quantify, right? To have a place where we've kept track of that information is a great resource for people to go back to and use during those negotiation sessions so that you can clearly communicate the impact that you've made.
Yeah.
All really good.
The work that I do, like the courses that I offer, I'll have like a section where you actually need to go and do some almost anthropological digging, right? So I know I have, and you and I've talked about this. I think every woman needs a manila folder with every thank you note, every beautiful email, every lovely thing that anybody has ever said. to us, because those are the moments when you can look back and go, wow, I've got like 15 thank you notes from people who spoke about my, my ability to really bring the team together around difficult things. You can pull out very, very insightful comments from those thank you notes. Most of them don't just say thank you. Most of them tell you why people appreciate you, and there's so much rich information in there.
And what a great source when you might be feeling a little bit of a dip in the confidence before a negotiation, like you need to have your,
Mhm.
your reminders of why you are worth it. Like, what a great resource to go back to boost yourself up. I see there's a question here related to this as well, and this is quite interesting. So, in negotiation, after saying yes to an offer and you don't feel comfortable with it, how can you like reapproach this? How can you renegotiate?
I would say just those words. Like if you haven't signed the offer, then I would immediately, when you feel that way, I would sit with the feeling. Why do I not feel this way? What did I fail to, what did I fail to bring up, or how did I not stand up for myself? And I would approach it in that same way. I would send an email or reach out to the individual and say, I'd like to have another follow-up conversation. I don't think I did myself justice in that conversation, and it's important to me that I stand up for my value, and ask for the ask for and it's salary might be one of them. We overinflate the importance of salary. It is important, 100%. But you know what? If you're willing to pay for my $25,000 MBA, that's as good as salary, and it's not taxable.
Yeah.
So there are other benefits that are not monetary, but they have a huge monetary value. An extra week of vacation. Those types of things we often rush through because we just want to get to the end of it. And then we come to the end of it and we go, oh, this doesn't feel good.
Right.
Language that I've often used is, I want to have this conversation because I said yes too quickly. And in looking at the agreement right now, I don't feel like my skills and talents are valued. And so there's a few things that I'd like to circle back to and have a conversation and talk about, what would help me feel valued in the role, but also ensure that I'm able to perform at my optimal, my maximum value for you, right? What's important to them, right? They want you at your best. And if I forgot to negotiate flexibility, but I'm always going to be racing in late for meetings at 9 a.m., that's a big deal. I'm not going to be at my best. So, I think that's some of the language that I've used in the past. It's been really successful.
Incredibly helpful. This one's quite, I think, I can, relate to it as well. When negotiation isn't going the way you think it will, right? It's not perhaps going the way that you want it to. Emotions come into play, right? And as women in particular, we're often, thought of being rather emotional, sentimental. Any tips for keeping emotions in check during a negotiation, especially when something isn't particularly going the way that you thought it might?
Yeah, so I mean, part of that's planning, and before you go into the negotiation, planning for what is my out. So never going into a conversation that doesn't have an end time attached to it. I really like 30 minutes. You can get a lot of conversation done in 30 minutes. When you book an hour to talk about a negotiation, you're going to be going off on trails, and you might find yourself in a space where they might say, oh, I'll have to go check on this. I'll have to go check on this. I don't know if we can do that. I don't think we can do that. And starting to get deflated. It is perfectly acceptable to end the conversation to say, I think we've done enough for today. I'd really like to meet with you again tomorrow. You've given me some things to think about. I want to take this back, and then let's, these are the times I have tomorrow that we could meet. Let's go back and try to solve these pieces. I would always reaffirm, though, the things you've already accomplished. So I'm feeling good about this and this, but I'd like a bit more time to think about your position on this and this. So let's connect tomorrow. The thing about negotiation, and this isn't divorce, this isn't high conflict, real estate or mergers and acquisitions. Most of the negotiations you're going into are that you want to work with this other person, either in an employment capacity or in a business capacity. if they want to work with you, they don't want to develop another relationship with someone else. If you are the top candidate, they don't want you, they want to exhaust your ability to say yes before they go on to the number 2 candidate. They don't want the second best person. They want the best person, right? And so just taking your time, I think, would be really important advice. Don't rush through it. Although time is often used as a tactic to increase your willingness to say yes to a bad deal. So watch out for that.
Okay, very helpful. Here's another very interesting one. You spoke about girls negotiating differently with boys versus girls. Is there a difference between how men versus women in a position of power receive a woman negotiating with them? So that's interesting. So it's how does the person across the table, typically a man, how do they process and receive that information when the negotiation is happening with the woman on the other side of the table?
Yeah, I mean, this is sadly the situation that as women we often find ourselves in, is protecting the male ego. Don't cry in front of a man. Don't make him uncomfortable with your emotion, right? And I would love to be able to stand here and say, just cry in front of him, it'll be fine. But the truth is, if you're meeting with a venture capitalist in your waterworks, they are forming an opinion of you. And so you need to assess what it is that you want. Is this a person that you want to work with, first of all? If they are uncomfortable with you, that's a great question that often happens to arise during negotiation. During negotiation, you actually tend to see the ugliest side of the other person. If they're going to be harsh, they're going to be harsh then. And so if you get those feelings of, oh, I don't know if I like this person, you may want to explore that further. And that's why preparing is so important, right? What is the vibe that you want to walk into? What is the energy you want to bring to that conversation? Somebody who is investing $5 million into funding your venture, they need to feel confident. What do they need out of this? And if they don't feel confident because they're perceiving that you're not professional in that situation, then that's not going to help you. And so different circumstances will be different. I mean, and we can't paint all people with the same brush. Not everybody is uncomfortable with emotion. Most people are comfortable with uncomfortable people across the table. Most people recognize we're having a conversation about money or about, we're negotiating something, and this sucks for you because you're having to defend, right? There is that human recognition. But we have to be careful not to push that too hard. I mean, ultimately, what do you want out of this? Do you want the person across the table to be emotionally supportive and sensitive? Or do you want to get the most amount of money and benefit out of this negotiation that will serve you well? So there's a bit of a dichotomy there where I want you to live your best life and be authentic. But in some of those circumstances, there is a sort of a shield that you need to bring in with you and really protect your energy, your mindset, and prepare how you want to be perceived in that conversation. Hopefully it's the same person that you are.
Yes, absolutely. There are so many great questions here. I think I'll ask you one more just so that we make sure that we've got some time still for those who are able to stick around for more of the. Catherine, I often encounter places that say they don't negotiate salary, whereas my male friends rarely encounter this. Are there ways to get them to negotiate other than moving on to somewhere else?
Well, that would depend on whether you're already in the organization or whether you're applying for another organization. Tip number 1 here, never ask if salary is negotiable. Okay. Just assume it is. And that is some of the chutzpah that men will often bring, is they don't ask, is this negotiable? They just say, oh, I expected, given what this position is and what my experience is, that you were going to be offering me $130,000. So I'm not quite sure how to take an offer of $80,000, right? And so it's just this assumption that is made, and that allows you to take up space there. I mean, if your company has a history of not rewarding women, not promoting women, then vote with your feet. I mean, I don't think that you're going to ever be tapped on the shoulder and told, well, here, you've been working hard for these last 15 years, so here's a pile of money that we're going to give you to reward you. They will happily let you work like with every ounce of energy that you have and pay you what you're being paid. So, you know, I would encourage you to not let your worth be determined by what your company says it can and cannot do. As women in this sector, you are in demand. Every company that's out there has diversity goals, and those are opportunities for you to find a place that values you, compensates you appropriately, and isn't just doing that in a tokenism way, but actually is building a culture where the perspectives of diverse folks are valued. So
Yes.
vote with your feet.
Yes. I just wanted to almost like re-say what I heard, reiterate what I heard you say there. Like, don't let your company determine your value and your worth, right?
Mhm.
Like this is a number or some benefits that you are negotiating. But at the same time, you ultimately know, what you're worth, your situation. So these are
And
all
there's a
so incredibly
pragmatism there too. I just
yes.
want to interrupt and say, like, you have to be pragmatic. You can't go in and say, if my boss makes 150,000, I can't ask for 160. That would be
Right.
absurd. My boss is not going to take less money than me, um, but your worth is not based on that number. One of the things I repeat over and over and over again is, if you are being headhunted or recruited for a job, the job of HR or the person who's offering you that job, their mandate is to get you to say yes at the lowest possible price, right? And that lowest possible price might be very different for you versus a man. But their goal is to get to the lowest price that you say yes to. Your goal is to get to the highest price that you can say yes to and feel valued with that offer.
Yes. Oh, yes, 1,000 times yes, Joanne. I'm so thrilled with what you were able to share with us today. And like again, like thank you so much. A round of applause for Joanne and for taking the time to share with us, to talk with us about blind spots and to move this topic up in our minds because it affects all aspects of our lives. So again, for those of you who are on this, I was going to say on this call, on this, lunch and learn with Joanne, there's a lot of information on her website. Her blogs are tremendous. Like, honestly, read some of those, listen to some Pink. You will be like, power pose move. You'll be so ready to go. It'll just be like, oh, why didn't I do this years ago? Honestly, she's an ongoing source of inspiration and practical information. So Joanne, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your expertise over the lunch hour with us. We really appreciate it. It's been tremendous.